Alright, what is up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Chris, and today, back here with another video. And, after last night's game, I kind of decided that I wanted to make a video to kind of talk about a handful of things that have come up. Whether it was just, in comments or questions or just, rumors around the league, things like that. Obviously the Flyers, last stretch, being 5-5 in their last 10. They've lost 4 of their last 6 games, and they haven't necessarily had, good starts in some of these games. Last 2 games in particular, where you had to come back against Buffalo, and then last night against Washington, you had a rough 40 minutes, and you just didn't have enough left in the tank there, in that third period. I kind of just want to bring up a couple things. So obviously, there's been trade rumors about a bunch of different guys and things like that. But I'm going to get to that in a minute, because today there was some news. Andreoff, he ended up getting sent to the taxi squad. So he goes down after only playing 1 game up here. Had a fight last night. And as I talked about in the game, that was a huge momentum booster for the Flyers. It gave them some life late in that first period when the score was already 2-1. And as I said, they carried that into the second and then took that penalty, kind of slipped away from them a little bit, and they found themselves down 4-1 at the end of the second there. And also Wade Allison has been recalled to the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. That's awesome news. Allison was hurt. I cannot wait to see Allison play. I think it's unbelievable that we can finally now see him, because for so long he's just battled injury and it sucks. Again, he's always been looked at as one of those guys that has a great shot. And I think he's definitely a guy that could really help out the Flyers in a handful of years. So I think it's awesome to see Allison get up there, and hopefully we can see some games coming up with the Phantoms with that whole COVID situation they had the other night. But as I brought up trade rumors, right? There's been a bunch of talk about, the Flyers. Do they need a defenseman or do they need a forward? Well, there's still people that think out there that they need a forward. I think that's ridiculous. There is no reason why this team needs a forward. There just isn't. There's way too much talent, way too much depth. They have guys that can come into the lineup and play. I mean, they've done so many things with the forwards. This team is just too loaded at the forward position, and anywhere to whether it's a center or a winger or whatever, they don't need a forward. They don't need a sniper either. I still see people, and I still get comments and people asking me, like, do you think they should get Line A? I'm like, first of all, Line A's already been traded. He's not going to leave Columbus right now. And he's also been struggling. I've heard it many times. I've said it a lot. I remember Jason Martinez told us on the podcast, like, those guys are streaky, and he's right. I mean, the only guy that isn't is Ovechkin. and honestly, and there were even times, like last year, where Ovechkin was a little streaky, where, like, the 700, it took him like 6-7 games to finally get that 700th goal. Was probably on his mind so much. So, like, I wouldn't even say that that's just streaky, but it's just like, I think you get my point, is that I think Line A was pointless in 7 games and then had a goal and an assist last night and then still got benched in the third period. So I don't necessarily understand why everybody thinks Line A is just a pure solution to come to Philadelphia. It just doesn't make sense to me. I'm completely over it as well. As for a defenseman, I would like a defenseman. I think the Flyers, they need a veteran presence to kind of come in. I understand some of the things Alain Vigneault has done. Obviously scratching Phil Myers before last night's game, as everyone practiced on Wednesday. He was with Prosser, and he wasn't hurt because he was coming back from an injury that he sustained against Pittsburgh, and I believe it was the second game against the Penguins, by my memory, and he ends up getting scratched for last night's game. Now, this may be a surprise because it's like, you're scratching arguably your third best D-man, but he hasn't played like their third best D-man. I think there's times where I personally see Myers as a guy where he loses a lot of puck battles that he shouldn't. With his size being 6'5", he needs to use the body more. And I think that's been one thing that they talked about. There's been a handful of times, him and Sanheim, I would say, I think they both need to use the body more. But I think that what they've done with Myers, it makes sense, because he is young and he's going to learn that. He's still 24 years old, so I think it's going to be a learning curve for these guys, and I think they need to kind of mold Myers into the guy where he has to think that, like, his spot in the lineup is not a guarantee, even though it pretty much is. It's just a wake-up call saying, hey, let's go, play better. And I think they want that from him, and that's kind of the message it sends. I think kind of just to go off a handful of other coaching moves. I mean, Patrick at fourth line center I really don't like. I don't think it does nothing for Patrick. He's not able to do anything. He can't create offense. He's getting a handful of minutes a night. I believe last night he played 9.5 minutes. I think 9:31 exactly. I don't like it. I don't mind some of the line combinations. I think it might be time you have to break up that JVR, Couturier, and Farabee line. Because I think you just have to revisit some things with the way that the team's playing. As I said, you dropped 4 of your last 6. I think there's been a lot of times where, it seemed like last night in the first 40 minutes of that game, the Flyers barely tested Samsonov. They had 5 shots in that second period, and they had a lot of zone time. I mean, from my eyes, it seemed like majority of the play was in, my area of where I was seating at Wells Fargo, because it's where the Flyers were shooting at that time. It felt like my head was kind of more this way than it was the other way, which is for Washington. That's just kind of how it felt. I mean, there was a lot of Flyers pressure. They had a lot of things. Everything they have done is to the outside, though. It's tough because they can't really get that play in front. I like how they've used their points. I just wish they would take more shots, and that's kind of one thing they've talked about, is that they passed up a lot of opportunities to shoot the puck last night, and they had some really good quality chances that they passed up. So I think for the most part, you kind of have to get back and again, I'm not a big thing with the shots on goal. I've talked about that before with like the, how many shots they have or how many chances they have, again, it's quality over quantity. So I would rather have the quality chance than just, that wrister from the point that the goalie can see or whatever. But I think there's been times where they have passed up a lot of opportunities, especially in last night's game. But again, I think they've worked on that. I think the last 10 games or so, we've seen a lot of improvements with the way that they've played offensively. And I think, it's getting better game by game. It's just consistently they can't put it together. The good thing about it is that, they're able to come back in games, and we've seen that a lot this year where they've had that spark, but sometimes it's gonna come back and bite you, and that's what it does. I mean, a team like Washington isn't gonna lose a game like that. So I think for the most part, if the Flyers can get that consistency going, because again, I think there's a lot of it where, I look a lot of this team from last year where I think to myself, like, where were they last year? And last year they were 12-7-5 at the 24 game mark, and that's the same amount of points, 29 points, just by the math, same amount of points and everything. So again, they're right around the same range. And this was like November around that time. So they were, they were one of the best teams in November last year and things like that. But again, it's a different year. There's different guys on the roster, things like that. So I think they're still kind of getting in. I think it's just a learning curve right now is kind of the main thing. Overall, I just think the team's defense has been bad. There's just been a lot of times where they just it's just like the little like mental mistakes. Like last night, first goal for Washington, the Ovechkin goal. Why does Moose try to force that up? Like, why not just let Coots take it behind the net? Instead, he forces it up. Well, it goes off the board's funny, and Ovechkin's right there, and he pounces on it. I saw a lot of people saying that was Provorov. From my angle, it looked like that it went off the boards, and I think that's why Provorov kind of missed it. It looked like he tried to play with his skate, which we see Provorov kind of do that a lot, which is perfectly fine when you're resetting in the zone. There's no issue with that. It's just it went off the boards, and the pass was just a little too closer to the boards than it was to Provorov. It just came right out. So, again, the team's defense has been bad. They've put guys in weird spots. I think there's been many times where they struggle to get the puck out of the zone once, twice, 3 times. They just have a lot of turnovers. They're in that Buffalo game, the first Reinhart goal, Myers loses the puck along the wall, and again, he's 6'5", and Taylor Hall gets in there and muscles him off the puck. That's the thing that I talk about with Myers, is that they want him to use the body more, and that's perfectly fine. He's 6'5", use your body. Again, the team's defense hasn't been good. Their overall play, again, it's been better, though. I think because again, we've seen stints of it where it's been like really good, or it's been really poor, or it's been average, or so-so, whatever you want to call it. And again, they had those two back-to-back shutout wins against Buffalo. That was the best 2 game stint I've seen all this of the whole year so far. How good this team's played offensively, defensively, special teams, PK, all that stuff. And again, at that time, you're going up against the number 1 power play in the league in Buffalo. I know they didn't have Jack Eichel for the 1 game, but they did the 2nd game. And I don't think, and again, like the Flyers, they didn't even give up a goal that weekend. So again, the penalty kill has been better as of late. I'll say that. It's looked better. It's been more aggressive. They've kind of broken up passes. The lanes have been good. They've given up a handful of opportunities. The Capitals, they had a handful of chances last night. But again, I think they've played pretty good on the PK as of late. Power play, they had the goal last night, Konechny. So again, the special teams is getting there. I think they got to be a little more consistent with the units. And that's for more of the power play than it is the PK. But I think for the units, they kind of just have to kind of stick with the same things. I personally like Gostisbehere. The point, I've talked about that a lot. I really just want them to go to the basic setup where it's goes to the point, G, Voracek in both in their prime spots, Coots in the slot, and JVR in front. Because I think what the Flyers kind of miss is plays in the slot, and that's kind of what they did last night. They had Konechny score, he had set up in the slot, great pass from Hayes over to him, and they got that play in the slot where at times that was kind of the Flyers like bread and butter for the longest time, and at times this year it just hasn't been there. If you go back, you look at that power play that had just expired in that Buffalo game on Tuesday, where the Giroux goal, right before the Giroux goal, I think it was like 3 or 4 seconds. One of the biggest issues with that power play was that everything is to the outside. They had nothing in the middle of the ice, so it's tough. But again, I think they could be more consistent with that, and I think they're going to be as the games roll on here. You have a tough stretch coming up. Every game is so crucial now. Because you're getting it almost at the halfway point. Flyers have played 24 games. They have games in hand on teams. They're tied in games with Boston. They've played 24. Boston has 32 points. They're 14-6-4. In third, you have Pittsburgh with 26 games played. So the Flyers have 2 games in hand on the Penguins, and they're 4 points back. The Penguins have 33 points. As for Washington, they've played 26 games. So Flyers have 2 games on the Capitals. They have 36 points. And the Islanders, Flyers have 3 games on them. The Islanders have played 27, and they have 38 points. In their last 10 games, they are 9-0-1. Islanders are on a 7-game win streak. They've played really well as of late. So the Flyers kind of have to pick it up here. You have a lot of tough games coming up. You have, obviously, the Capitals tomorrow night. Again, coming up against the Capitals again. The game this week against Washington, and then you got the Rangers, Islanders, and then New Jersey on March 23rd there. So you have the Rangers, 2 road games there, then 2 road games against the Islanders, and then home against the Islanders and Devils there, and then you're also home against the Rangers again. So you have a lot of games coming up against tri-state area teams, so you're going to have to try to pick up some wins here. Again, the Islanders, that 3-game skid's going to be tough, so we're going to have to see what happens there. But I think the one thing you have to worry about before that is, Saturday night, tomorrow. Tomorrow's a must-win game. I think the Flyers have to win tomorrow night. I think that would be huge. You get 2 points, you get back on the winning track, kind of get back in that mojo. I think they just have to start to kind of pick up a handful of wins here and kind of just keep it going. Around this time last year, that's kind of what it was. It seemed like they'd get, maybe 1 or 2, maybe even 3 games they'd lose, then they'd win 4 or 5, and then they'd maybe lose 1, then go on another little streak, lose 1, go on another little streak. That's kind of what they did for a majority of the season. Then you had the rough patch in December, in the middle where you lost the 3 games, then you won a lot, and then you had the really, rough end of the month starting up in January. And then again, that's kind of what it was. It was just like, they won a handful of games and lost 1, maybe 1 or 2. And then they went right back on a little streak, and then they had the 9-game winning streak going into to the whole end of the postponement of the season because of COVID and everything like that. So, again, it's still early on. You've only played 24 games. We don't know what this team is yet. We didn't even know what last year's team was until the 9-game winning streak before everything that happened and things like that. So I think they're just still on a learning curve, and I think that's kind of tough for some people to understand because again, you expect them to kind of be hot off the jump, and it's just kind of been like that. I mean, it's so tough because there's so many guys with so many different things. They've played one game healthy all year, and I wouldn't even really say it was healthy. It was that Tuesday game. I believe it was on March 2nd. I believe so. March 2nd against Pittsburgh, the 5-2 loss. That was their healthy game of the year, the only one, because starting off the year you had Gossesper out because he was on the COVID list the first game of the year against Pittsburgh. Then you lost Coots in the second game, and then pretty much once Coots came back, everybody was hit with COVID. So that was pretty much it, and then they were down like half the roster for like 3 games, and then you kind of started to get everybody back in bunches, and they had the one game, well, again, as I said, March 2nd versus Pittsburgh. That was TK's first game back after COVID, so I wouldn't even really say they were that healthy. So essentially, they've pretty much played this whole year without a complete healthy lineup. Myers was out for a game. You've had Raffle out the last few games, so they've battled injury too. Again, it's not an excuse, but it is something to obviously keep in mind, because again, it's tough to do that, especially in a shortened year with everything going on. One thing I want to talk about too is Carter Hart. Obviously, the play in front of Brian Elliott has been better in front of Carter Hart, because overall, Hart has just he's been let out to dry at times. I mean, there's just so many. I mean, the defense has been just as bad as Hart has. I think there's been times where you've had a handful of games where you kind of think to yourself, Hart, you maybe could have had that one. I know a lot of people want to kind of blame him for that Sunday game against Washington, where there were some of them. I mean, I look at it like this. Those 3 goals in that game, where they were, all 3 of them were just complete defensive breakdowns. Jensen walks in for a snipe. We have a scrum at the red line. Nobody's even back. The second goal, okay, the icing call, and then it was just a botched icing call, and then you lost the face-off cleanly. It was a set play. You had 2 wingers go to the same defenseman, and Orlov creeps in, and that's not an easy save to make, especially when he's wide open. And then the first goal, Ovechkin. I mean, it was a great play by Oshie, and that's just kind of how it was. And then again, like, I just don't necessarily see how you blame Carter Hart for any of that when the defense in front of him has not been good. Last year they didn't necessarily have to get as many timely saves because the defense was so good. And like when they did, it was good. It was a good thing when they got the timely saves, but they didn't have to worry about it as much because the defense was so good. They barely let up any shots. So they haven't been getting as many timely saves because they've given up a lot of opportunities, because they've just struggled defensively. They've given up the puck a lot. They've turned the puck over in spots where he just can't turn the puck over. And overall, I think that might be why they kind of need a shake up. Now, my question is this: if they're gonna, trade for anything, there's 4 defensemen that I kind of have. Obviously, Ekholm is one. That's been the guy that's been rumored the most, and obviously you have to keep the expansion draft Seattle in mind, because I think that's kind of what everything the Flyers have done this year has kind of had Seattle in mind. You have David Savard with Columbus, I think will be another one. Jamie Alexiak right now with the Dallas Stars, and then Nicholas Hjalmarsson with the Arizona Coyotes. Those are the 4. I'll start off with Ekholm. Obviously, 3.75. That's a great contract for a good veteran defenseman. He's 30 years old, left-handed. He's 6'4". He's huge. He's a very good defenseman, good defensive defenseman. The issue is that he has 1 year left on his deal after this year. 3.75 for 21-22. So you kind of have to put that into consideration. What do you give up? It's most likely going to be more on the prospect side. I was at the Phantoms game where they had Nashville scouts, where Tony Androkidis kind of broke that, and I was kind of literally sitting next to Tony as we were kind of talking about it. So that was one thing that was kind of, my personal guess is that the Flyers are going to have to give up a talented defenseman. The only one that they're not going to give up is York, because York wasn't in Lehigh Valley. It's going to be somebody that was, there with the Phantoms, and I don't necessarily know if Fletcher wants to do that. So I think we're going to have to wait and see, because I think it's tough with everything going on, because you have to keep in mind, like, right now, today, March 12th, is a month away from the trade deadline. You have April 12th. I don't really think the Flyers are going to be, like, complete buyers at the trade deadline. I don't even think they'll even do anything, to be honest, because you have to keep COVID in mind with the quarantine period and everything. So it's tough to really do anything, and it's the same thing with the waivers and all that stuff. So I think the next guy, obviously I said Savard. I think, his cap's a little higher, is 4.25, but this is his last year of his deal, 2021. So you'd be able to move, something for Savard to where you could get him back. I think he'd be a really good fit. He logs minutes. He's a very good, solid defenseman. He's big body too. So I think that's another guy that you could also pick up. And Alexiak is another one. He's huge too. I think Alexiak, he's 6'7", so I think that's a good one. And I know Jamie Bascout brought that up to me earlier, and that was definitely a good one. His contract is good, 2.1, and again, he has no years after this one, so it's just 2021 of the rest of his deal. So he has another UFA going into next season. So again, you don't have to worry about Seattle with that. Joel Emerson, he's a little more. Joel Emerson only has just the rest of this year, and it's at $5 million. It's higher, but I think it will be a good one. You might have to give up a little bit more to maybe match that salary, which is kind of the thing because the flat cap, it's tough. But there's been at least people kind of wondering, will the cap go up with the whole TV deal with ESPN and things like that? So it doesn't look like it's going to. I don't think it is. But it's been kind of talked about. Could it? Could it not? Who knows? But again, I think for the most part, I think these are just a handful of guys that I'd like. I think a defenseman will be nice, but my question is this: is Flesher ready to go all in now? I don't think the Flyers have to go all in right now to try to win a Stanley Cup this year, this moment. I don't think they do. I think they've realized they have more than a handful of years left with this group and with the guys here. I don't think it's a dire need to kind of go out now and kind of visit a bunch of stuff. So I think for the most part, I think the Flyers are still in a good spot. Again, there's no need to panic. I've said it all year. I think this team's still a very good team. This team's going to make the playoffs. I know they will. I don't see any reason why they won't. I just think that, we kind of have to take a look here and say, okay, they need to be better. And I think they might just have to have a little regroup inside the room and kind of just talk some things over because, again, this really is not the time where you can be losing games like this with this good of a division, and you kind of have to pick it up here. So usually the Flyers are very good at bouncing back. We've seen that many times. So again, tomorrow night, huge game, must-win game against Washington. Let me know your guys' thoughts on any of the things I kind of talked about. Remember, guys, podcast articles, those links are on my channel. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I'll see you guys in the next one, and goodbye.